Story 1. I graduated with a Doctor of Philosophy degree from a university in the United Kingdom many years ago. The graduation gown, hood, and hat are quite expensive to purchase, almost £1,000 British pounds for all three, so most people pay around £30 to £40 to rent them for a morning or afternoon. This allows enough time to attend the ceremony and take photos. A friend of mine owned a Doctor of Philosophy gown, hood, and hat because he had been planning to enroll in a doctoral program, but he ended up not pursuing it. Very kindly, he gave the entire set to me. I was absolutely thrilled. It meant I didn't need to pay the rental fee, and I could potentially use them in the future as a staff member when participating in other graduation ceremonies, which I have done over the years. I made the mistake of telling one of my managers this story, even though I was working at a different university by that point. My line manager was about to graduate with her Doctor of Philosophy from my old university. She asked if she could borrow the gown, hood, and hat, and even though I felt uncomfortable, I agreed because I wanted to stay on her good side. She ended up keeping the gown, hood, and hat for 6 months. I must have asked her about 10 times to return them, and every time she gave me a different excuse. I'm getting more professional photos taken, or I forgot, or I have family visiting from out of town and I want them to see me in the robe, and so on. The final straw came when she told me that she believed she should get to keep them because she worked hard to earn her Doctor of Philosophy. Excuse me, so did I, and I didn't fail mine the first time and have to resubmit. Then she added that since I got them for free, it wasn't a big deal. That reasoning completely disregarded the sentimental and practical value they held for me. In the end, I had to make up a story about a friend who wanted to borrow the gown for an upcoming ceremony. I told her that if they weren't back in my possession by the end of the week, I'd be coming to her house with my husband and my friend to collect them over the weekend. She did finally return everything in good condition. If she hadn't been my manager, and quite an ineffective one at that, I would have handled the situation differently. But honestly, the sense of entitlement some people have is truly surprising. No, you are not entitled to my belongings just because you believe you deserve them more than I do. That's not how it works. As a result of this experience, I no longer let anyone borrow the graduation regalia. I know I'll never have the funds to replace them if something were to happen. Nor could I justify spending that kind of money again. They are too valuable to me both financially and emotionally. Edit. I've mentioned this in the comments several times, but since people keep asking about how my friend came to own a Doctor of Philosophy graduation gown, hood, and hat before even enrolling in a doctoral program, here's what I know. I think he either received them as a gift or purchased them at a significantly reduced price because they didn't meet quality control standards. I can't quite remember all the details. However, part of what made the regalia so meaningful to me was that my friend could have sold them for a decent profit, but he didn't. He knew several people who were undertaking doctoral degrees at that university and could have given the items to someone else, but he chose me. He even refused money when I offered to pay. At the time, I was working 2 jobs and had no family nearby, so perhaps that's why he thought I could use the support. Regardless of the reason, I was and still am deeply grateful for his kindness. Story 2. Hi. First story here. Quarantine is giving time to remember old experiences and waste an ungodly amount of time on YouTube. This is from 3 years ago, so it's more on the narration than on the verbatim memory side. There is this particular and very big toy store I used to go to because it has lots of plastic models and RC kits. Plus, it was on the way to a regular client for a certain project of my company, so after the meetings I used to go and take a look. This particular time, a bit after 5 p.m., I'm checking some models and a sweet old lady comes asking if I can recommend a toy for her grandkid. I'm all in for things that stimulate creativity and help her choose a wooden model kit of a train that she loves. Then back to check some gunpla. I'm checking some boxes when I have a rather hard tap on my shoulder. Karen makes her entrance in her Karen fashion. Hey, I need some help. I need you to find something for my daughter. I look at her. She's like a showcase of evidently fake glasses, watch, purse, and hair color. By her hand is a girl, maybe 9, I'm terrible with kids' ages, who looks a bit uncomfortable with the situation. I try to answer, I don't. Do your job instead of giving excuses, my time is valuable. You were helping that old woman just before. She snaps back, without allowing me to finish anything. Note, this was in Spanish, and she used a fairly rude form of old woman. I could have fought back, but the girl was looking really uncomfortable with the situation. I decide to play along for her. I squat to the level of the girl. Hi. I tell her my name and continue. You want me to help you find a toy especially for you? The girl nods. Yes. Karen intervenes. I want you to find her a good doll or something. I take the nod and ask the girl, you want a doll? Or maybe things to build big rockets and fast cars? Her eyes widened a lot with those 2 words. Rockets, I like them. What? No, she needs girls' toys to play. She doesn't need boys' toys. Karen protests. The girl looks up with a supplicant look, and I notice a hint of regret on Karen's face. Time to keep pushing. Okay, sweetie, give me 1 second and I'll bring something for you. I told the little girl, and remembering a bit of the thing I had looked for the old lady, I picked up 2 boxes. One is a red Lego Technic plane, a bit on the expensive side because screw Karen, and the other is a small water pressure bottle rocket kit. I came back with the boxes a bit hidden and said, okay, these are special toys for big, smart, and strong girls. I present the boxes and Karen looks at me, irate. These are not for her, she needs dolls. Get me a Barbie or something like that right now. Little poor Karen knew, but the battle was already lost. The girl's eyes widened as if she had found the Holy Grail and extended her arms for the Lego box, hugging the box with more care than any hug her mother would deserve. Why don't you listen to me? Get me a doll for the girl. Who you think you are? Karen now tries to impose herself. But I want this, Mom, please. I raise and look her in the eyes, in the most menacing way I can, very mild to be honest. I'm not exactly a big guy. You asked me to find a toy for her. Her opinion, not yours, is what counts. She looks at me furious. If not contained, she would have left me bald with screaming, but the little girl pulled her arm and stopped her. Please, Mom, I want this one. I don't want dolls. Defeated, she huffs and leaves, pulling the girl who refuses to let the box go. On my side, I take a moment to pick my gunpla. Hey, I felt like I deserved one. And to the cashier. I'm just getting my shopping bag when Karen reappears, followed by the manager. That's him? He was rude and didn't help. The manager replies in a huge sigh. Lady, he is a client. She looks confused as I present her my shopping bag. On her side, the little is holding her own shopping bag with a Lego plane. I just smiled at her and winked. She gave me back a smile that made my whole week. Story 3. This colleague of mine, let's just call her Karen to keep it simple, is 20 years older than me and has 2 kids. We pretty much started at the same time at our current workplace. I only had a few months advantage. But because the kind of field I've been working in, I had some special knowledge at the time, and just after a few months, I've had to teach some new colleagues, including Karen. Everyone who I taught became independent after a while. Everyone but Karen. She was always dealing with her family at working hours, talking on her phone with school teachers, her mother-in-law, her mother, her kids, her husband, her sisters, pediatricians, sometimes pharmacists, and so on, depending on the issue currently on hand. Most of the time, she called her kids for banal things: start the washing machine, open the window in your room, eat, drink, take your medicine, do your homework, etc. The oldest of her kids is 13 years old, by the way. My family and my children are more important than this, she used to say, referring to our job. The point is that she was on her phone a lot, and because of this, she worked very slowly and made many mistakes, and had a hard time seeing through big projects. Haven't even really paid any attention, I think because she knew I would always help her. And I did, because she was my partner. We work in pairs in this workplace. Because of her attitude, our immediate boss always handed me the harder, more complicated work with greater responsibility. Many times, I was forced to work overtime. When work has accumulated, Karen always said, "I can't stay. I have 2 kids," and left. Always. Not once would she stay and help. This year around spring, there was an amendment of the law which made it possible that age does not determine the level of salary, but rather abilities and skills. Basically, it lets the immediate bosses decide the salary and paid leave days, and not age and number of children are authoritative as before. So when the amendment came into force, our boss summoned all of us one by one and told everyone in private how the person's salary and leave days would change and why. We have been told that this information is private and is forbidden to share and discuss between colleagues. So my boss told me that he knows I work very hard and much more than my older partner. So I would deserve her salary, but unfortunately he can't raise that much due to the budget. So he gave me a 50% raise and 5 more paid leave days. I was unspeakably happy. That was way more than I expected. I went back to my office and continued my work. Karen was the last one summoned in. I saw that she was already sitting on needles. When she came back, she was fuming. "That's it. I'm gonna find a new job," she said. "Why? What's happened?" I asked. "I haven't got any raise, and my paid leave days will decrease. They can't take away my leave days. I have 2 children." The truth is that basic leave days could drop due to leadership decisions, but mothers still got extra days per child. I tried to stop her. "Karen, we really should not discuss this. We were told it is forbidden to share." She stormed out of our office. After half an hour she returned, still angry. Susan, another colleague, has 2 kids, also got her days decreased. Her basic is now lower than Janet, also a colleague, has no kids. I tried to reason. Susan works only 6 hours a day, and Janet takes all the big projects. But Janet has no children, no family. Why would she get more days? I bet she got a raise too. "Karen, that's the point. Abilities and skills matter more than the number of children from now on. Besides, we're not allowed to discuss this matter. If you're unhappy with the decisions, then you should talk to our boss. They don't appreciate me. You have no children either. How much raise have you got?" "None of your business, Karen." I kept my cool, and maybe that's what pissed her off the most. She immediately demanded our boss to let her change her seat because she doesn't want to sit and work next to me anymore. He didn't allow it. Karen still sits and sometimes works next to me. A little satisfaction that our salaries converged. Story 4. I'm 17 and was living with my parents in a nice neighborhood. They both work demanding jobs and travel a lot for business, so I'm used to being home alone for days at a time. I do my own laundry, cook my meals, and keep up with my schoolwork without anyone having to remind me. My parents trust me completely, and I prefer the quiet when I'm trying to focus on assignments. 2 years ago, I was having one of those typical afternoons. My parents were away on a business trip, and I had spread all my textbooks across the dining room table. I was working on a difficult calculus problem when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but sometimes delivery drivers need signatures, so I went to answer it. When I opened the door, I saw a little boy who looked about 7 or 8 years old. He was wearing what looked like a scout uniform and had a wagon behind him filled with boxes of popcorn. I asked him what he wanted, and he explained that he was selling popcorn to support his scouts group. I looked at the kid and felt a bit bad, but I genuinely didn't have any cash on me. My parents usually handle that stuff, and I mostly just use my debit card for emergencies. I told him no thanks and that I'd pass. I closed the door gently and went back to my homework. The kid seemed polite enough, and I assumed he'd just move on to the next house like any normal person would. But about 2 minutes later, someone started pounding on our front door. Not knocking, pounding, like they were trying to break it down. I jumped up from my chair, genuinely startled. When I opened the door, I saw the same little boy from before, but now he was standing next to a woman who I assumed was his mother. She looked furious. She demanded to know where my parents were. I told her they weren't home. Then she started yelling about why I had refused to support her son and how I was his first customer. Her tone was aggressive and over the top. I tried to explain that I was only a teenager and didn't have any cash on me. I told her to stop bothering me and try her luck somewhere else, but she wasn't having it. She pointed at our house and shouted about how we lived in such a big place, but couldn't afford to buy a kid's popcorn. That's when the little boy started crying. I wasn't sure if it was because I didn't buy his popcorn or because his mom was screaming, but either way, I felt terrible. I never wanted to make a kid cry. She kept yelling about how I could do that to a child and demanding that I give him a chance. I was getting really uncomfortable. This woman was yelling at me on my own doorstep. Her kid was crying, and I was alone in the house. I decided I needed to end this situation quickly. I told her that she needed to leave or else we had security cameras all around the house. I was totally bluffing about the cameras, but I hoped it would make her think twice about whatever she was planning to do next. Instead of backing down, though, she got even more aggressive. She stepped closer to me and raised her hand like she was going to hit me. I quickly pulled out my phone and started recording. When she saw me filming, she completely lost it. She lunged forward and tried to grab my phone right out of my hands. She screamed that I couldn't record her and demanded that I delete it right away. I yelled back that she needed to get off my property and that I was calling the police. I managed to pull my phone away from her, but she kept trying to grab it. Her son was still crying, and now he was tugging on her shirt trying to get her to stop. The whole situation was completely insane. She continued ranting about how her son had worked so hard and that I was ruining his first day. I told her that wasn't my problem and that she couldn't force people to buy things. She made one more grab for my phone, and I stepped back and slammed the door. I immediately locked it and called the police. Through the window, I could see her still standing there, yelling at the door. Her poor kid looked mortified. When the police arrived about 10 minutes later, she was still there. I watched from the window as they talked to her. She was gesturing wildly and pointing at our house. The officer looked tired, like he'd dealt with this kind of thing before. After about 15 minutes, one of the officers came to talk to me. He explained that the woman claimed I had been rude to her son and refused to support local scouts. When he asked if I wanted to press charges for attempted assault, I thought about it. Part of me wanted to, just to teach her a lesson. But then I looked at her kid, who was still standing by their car looking embarrassed. I told the officer no, that I just wanted them to leave me alone. He said he understood, and that he'd told her she wasn't allowed back on my property. He warned me to call them immediately if she bothered me again. The officer walked back to Karen and said something that made her face turn red. She grabbed her son's hand, and they got in their car and drove away. The kid left his wagon of popcorn behind. About an hour later, my neighbor knocked on the door. Karen had gone to every house on our street, telling people that the rude teenager in the big house had made her son cry and refused to support local children. She was trying to get other neighbors to complain about me. My neighbor told me that Karen had come to her door saying I was some kind of troublemaker. But she had told Karen that she'd known my family for years and that I was one of the most polite kids in the neighborhood. Karen had made such a scene that several neighbors had also called the police. By the time my parents got home 2 days later, the whole street knew about the popcorn incident. My dad found the whole thing hilarious, but my mom was worried about me being alone when crazy people came to the door. About a week later, I was walking to the corner store when I saw Karen's car parked outside the grocery store. She was standing by the entrance with a different kid, probably her son's friend, and they had the same wagon of popcorn. A store manager was talking to them, and he didn't look happy. The manager told her that she couldn't solicit customers on private property without permission. She argued back that they were supporting local scouts, but he said he didn't care what they were supporting and that they needed to leave or he'd call the police. She saw me watching and pointed in my direction. She told the manager that I was the kid she'd been telling him about and how I had refused to support children. The manager looked at me, then back at her. He told her that she needed to leave immediately. Watching her get kicked out of the grocery store while her son looked embarrassed was satisfying. I bought my snacks and walked home with a smile on my face. Story 5. First post, be kind. This happened way back in the dark ages, 1986. I was 21 at the time and working for a gas station that was associated with a certain grocery store chain in Washington state. It was owned by a company not affiliated with said chain, but had locations at nearly every one. As this was long before the days of debit cards, this was a cash-only gas station. We didn't even take credit cards. Customers would pull up, pump their gas, and then come to my window to pay. We also sold cigarettes. No drinks, no snacks. Customers couldn't even get into my booth. I had been working there about a year when the company announced it was closing the location. My manager and I were offered positions at another location upstate, and we both accepted. We moved our respective families and started our new jobs. As new hires, this station was incredibly busy. We did more business in 8 HRS than my old location would do in a week. This location also had a different setup. Here you would pull into the station from a single entrance, pump your gas, and then drive forward to a single exit where the Pay Here booth was located. There were always 2 cashiers on duty. Each cashier had a cash drawer. One thing I should note, there were also no computers, so closing the drawer down between shifts was timing-consuming and tedious. We had to manually count the cigarettes remaining and count the cash drawers. We would fill out an end-of-shift report listing the starting balances and the ending balances. We also had to list the gallons sold from each pump. At the end of the shift, the total of gallons sold and the total cigarettes sold should equal the cash balance. It is important to note here that not once in the year I had worked for the previous location had I been off by more than 10 cents. The following morning after my first shift, I was informed by the manager that I was short $50. Impossible, I said. I balanced out yesterday. He said that I must have stolen that money after I had completed the paperwork. I just looked at him and said, no, I didn't. He gave me a verbal warning and said if it happened again I would be fired and the stolen money would be deducted from my paycheck this week. In the 5 days that followed, I realized quickly the manager was up to something. My old manager, who was just another worker now, was also accused of stealing, as was one other new employee. I can't vouch for the other employee, but I'm pretty sure she did nothing wrong. The employees that had been there a while were never accused of anything. I did some checking and found out this manager was relatively new, had only been there about 6 months, and the other cashiers had been here before him. Only new cashiers were being accused of stealing, and that location had been having stealing problems for about 6 months, and the turnover was high with the new employees. I came to work at 6 a.m. on a Monday only to be told I was being fired. For cause. The manager accused me of taking $500 out of my drawer the previous Friday. He said he only discovered it this morning, even though he had worked Sat and Sun. I said okay and left. I was pretty angry, and instead of going home, I parked in the grocery store parking lot and proceeded to settle in to watch the gas station. I knew that at 9 a.m. sharp, he would take the cash in the safe and make the weekend deposit. At 9 a.m. he left the gas station and headed to the bank. But instead of walking into the bank, he walked into the Indian casino next door. It's not really a casino like we think of today, but more of a betting parlor for the races. It did have slot machines, but no card tables. I think, well, this is interesting. He comes out of the casino at exactly 10 a.m., walks next door to the bank, does his business, and then heads back to the gas station. I head home with a plan. Every morning I follow him from the gas station to the casino. I take a picture of him leaving, and one of him arriving at the bank and walking into the casino. I take pictures of him coming out and then heading to the bank. I do this for 5 days straight. He even went on Saturday. On day 3, my old manager was fired for stealing $150. I get the film developed. No digital camera in the dark ages. Note the times and dates on the back of each one. Then I call the main office of the gas company. It's after 5, but I'm hoping someone is there. And there is. I speak to a woman and explain my situation, and she says she knows exactly who I should speak to and transfers me. By some grace of God, she has transferred me to none other than the president CEO of the company. I tell him my story and tell him I did not steal from his company and could prove who actually did. He took down my information and said he would be in touch. I'm thinking to myself, yeah, right. The next morning I went to the station to perform my usual observation of the manager. At 9 a.m. he leaves for the bank. At 10 a.m. he comes out. At that moment 2 stern-looking gentlemen approach him. One pulls out his wallet and shows him something. The other one is talking. The manager goes pale and takes a step back. Next thing I know, he is being escorted to a car I hadn't noticed, and they drive off. I lose them at a traffic signal, so I head back to the station. They all show back up about 5 minutes later, and a few minutes after that a police cruiser pulls in. The officer talks to the stern gentleman and proceeds to place the manager in handcuffs. The other man says nothing but is glaring daggers at the manager. The president called me later that afternoon and informed me that the manager had been arrested for embezzlement. Turns out that in 6 months he had managed to steal about $5K. He would take the store cash into the casino and gamble with it. If he won, he would make the normal bank deposit. If he lost, he would make the deposit and note in his records that we had been short the previous day. The CEO had already been focusing on that location because of the stealing and high turnover rate. But my information helped them figure out what exactly had been going on. I was thanked and sent a substantial check as a reward. My old manager was offered the manager's job, and I was offered my old job back. I declined as I had already found another job that I liked more and paid better. The gambling manager was sentenced to 1 year in jail and ordered to attend counseling for his gambling addiction. His wife divorced him and took their 3 children to California. His house was foreclosed on, and he ended up in a homeless shelter. Don't accuse me of stealing. I will get revenge. Story 6. This was a few years ago. I was a senior in high school. At the time, an 18-year-old male. I was a major snarky person and was very nihilistic due to my past. For a little context, I have an EAP, Individualized Education Program, at my school that allowed me to use my phone for music therapy since I was diagnosed with severe depression, anxiety, Asperger's syndrome, and PTSD. By law, teachers have to follow without questions or overruling, and if anyone tried to stop me, they could get fined, fired, etc. EAPs are no joke for a reason. My senior year, the old principal resigned, and we got Sergeant Jerk in his place. Starting out, he changed absolutely everything, and was very strict with it. I'm assuming to assert dominance to show he's no pushover. One of the biggest changes was a zero tolerance to digital devices in or out of the classroom. That included everything from phones, Bluetooth earbud headphones, smartwatches, etc. Teachers loved it until they figured out that it also applied to them, so they said screw it and didn't enforce it. Though, trying to listen to music in between classrooms was like trying to smuggle bombs onto a post-9/11 plane. I had a lot of the same teachers from years before, so they knew my story, and I was a good student, but I had a sense of humor and hard-headed, and they knew I could find a loophole in anything to get my way or prove my point. It all starts with a very crappy Monday morning. I was on edge as I always was at that school and decided to listen to some hard-hitting brutal death metal. It's therapeutic. I got stopped by Sergeant Jerk, and this is what took place. "Are you new here?" the principal asked me. "No." "Why?" "Ah, okay, give me your phone now." "I can't. I have in my paper." "I don't care. According to the handbook, no MP3 players, phones, any digital devices at all. I'm a man of my word, so hand it over." At this point, I can feel my anxiety rising. My hands were shaking and my eyes were getting warm and watery, and I couldn't breathe. I needed to get out of there quickly before I bursted. The office was far from where my emergency anxiety meds, and I knew I wasn't going to make it, so I tried walking to the bathroom till the principal yelled "Hey!" and forcefully grabbed my shoulder like a Karen. So as an irrational reaction, I turned and right-hooked him. He went down to the ground and everyone was laughing and going crazy about it, so I just booked it and ran. Thankfully, my favorite teacher, Mr. Place, managed to catch me and embrace me to calm down. I ended up passing out in his arms due to hyperventilating. After regaining consciousness in the nurse's office, there were a few cops, Mr. Place, my mom, and the principal with an ice pack on his chin and a bloody towel over his nose. I was questioned on exactly what happened, and after hearing my side, Mr. Place's side, and the camera footage, everyone sided with me, and my mom went ballistic because she worked hard to get me comfortable in school, and she had a few altercations with teachers harassing me. Unsurprisingly, I got a week's suspension, but I wasn't punished at home. I decided to follow his rules, but with my own little twist. I studied the student handbook front to cover and went for a quick gander in the basement of my house to find my dad's things from the 80s and 90s. Dad and I share a lot of interests, and he got me into all types of heavy metal and punk from a young age, so he passed this stuff down to me. After digging around, I was able to find his Walkman, cassette player, and a bunch of cassette tapes. I took my favorites of all time, Kill 'Em All by Metallica, Vulgar Display of Power by Pantera, Korn's first album, 40 Ounces to Freedom and self-titled album by Sublime, and lastly Tomb of the Mutilated Cannibal Corpse. It was a hard choice, but I didn't want them to crack in my pocket. The first day I was back in school, I was talked about a lot because I laid out the principal. I was embarrassed and felt bad about it, but it was in the past. I saw Sergeant Jerk in my first class, Mr. Place's class, so I stepped to the side and popped in a cassette tape. Walking back, Sergeant Jerk smirked and told me to step over to have a talk. "Looks like a week didn't give you enough time to think. Come with me," the principal said. "I'm sorry? I'm not breaking any rules." "Boy, don't make me out to be stupid. You obviously have your phone and listening to music. Last time I checked, my policy is still in effect." "Right, so technically I'm following your policy of no digital devices." "Fine then, you want to play smart? Prove it then." I proceeded to pull out the Walkman and some of the cassettes. He looked very confused. "See, sir, you said no digital device. I have right here is a Walkman with the original wired headphones. Since cassettes are analog, and you never said anything about no analog devices, I'm within my full right to jam out on this in and out of the classroom." Sergeant Jerk gets red in his face and starts stumbling over his words to rebuttal. "I mean, you say you're a man of your word, so how cowardly would you look if you let a teenager get to you and update the handbook? I see no harm with this. It abides with your rules." Sergeant Jerk grunts, then walks to the neighboring class as I exhale in relief and I start to feel my anxiety go down. I walk in and nod to Mr. Place. He closes the door and makes sure that Sergeant Jerk isn't nearby, then just bursts out laughing. I would say I stood my ground on that one.